Hi, my name is Pam Killeen, and welcome to my podcast, Circadian Reboot, where we discuss everything circadian. And today I'm thrilled to announce that again on the show, we have Morley Robbins. We're planning to do 3 parts to this series, and today is the second installment. So if you want, review last week's episode, and that episode should build onto today's show. Morley Robbins is also known as the Magnesium Man. He is a leading researcher and educator in mineral metabolism with a special focus on the profound role of magnesium, copper, and iron balance in chronic illness. After a successful 32-year career in the healthcare industry, Morley turned his attention to the root causes of disease, uncovering the critical importance of mineral balance in cellular energy production and oxidative stress management. He is the creator of the Root Cause Protocol, a comprehensive approach designed to restore mineral harmony and support deep healing at the foundational level. Through his work, Morley has helped thousands of individuals and practitioners worldwide better understand how mineral dysregulation underlies many modern health conditions, from fatigue and anxiety to autoimmune disorders and neurodegeneration. I'm really excited to collaborate with Morley, as I've been a mineral balancing practitioner since 2009, and I truly believe that when practitioners who share the same goals work together, especially those who understand the critical role minerals like copper and iron play in our overall health, they can maximize their ability to help clients heal. Again, Morley and I are planning a special 3-part interview series with each conversation building on the last, as our goal is to give people who are struggling with complex chronic illness more tools for their healing journey and hopefully help them move through the process a little faster and with more confidence. Morley, thank you so much for joining me again this week in part 2 of what I hope to be at least a 3-part interview. And today we're still going to be talking a lot about technical things. Next week, I'm hoping we get into more tangible, practical steps that people can do to help address this copper and iron issue, among other things. And to segue from last week's podcast, what I want to touch on is something I mentioned to you in a phone call we had, Morley. And this helps to tie a lot of what we said last week together, at least I hope. And that is that when I was really, really sick, when I had debilitating chronic fatigue in my 20s and my 30s, I wrongly believed that exercise would give me energy. And I'm somewhat of an athlete. And so I would exercise and exercise and exercise, thinking it was going to build energy in my body. And wrongly and tragically found out it kept making me sicker and sicker and sicker. But what I did notice is when I would climb a simple step of stairs, this step of stairs behind me, which is about 13 steps, I would go up those stairs and I would be breathless. I thought, well, I can go out and I can jog and I can do all these things. I can do the Stairmaster. I'm not breathless then, but doing a simple task like walking up a set of stairs would get me breathless. And so when I started learning about copper and iron, that's when I had my aha moment and I realized that it had something to do with my minerals. So I'm wondering if we can launch off of that story and maybe you can explain to many others who are probably experiencing similar symptoms who are also struggling with chronic fatigue.
Sure. No, I think it's a great launching point. That'd be really good. I think the unfortunate aspect of the information that's on the internet is that people are told that if they're tired, to take more iron. That somehow because again the way I envision the mitochondria is it's a stove. You've got a stove in your kitchen, but the stove doesn't know what's for dinner. The stove doesn't know what temperature to put the oven on. The stove doesn't know what pot to use to cook whatever's for dinner. You got to have a chef, and that's what copper is. Copper is the chef. And when you get into the weeds of the mitochondrial complexes, copper is very, very important for the intelligence of those complexes, especially complex 4. But there's compelling evidence that complex 1, 3, 4, and 5 are all copper dependent. But they always talk about, if you're tired, get more iron, which is absolutely the worst thing you could do, because it it's not going to revitalize the stove. You're just going to build a bigger stove. It's going to have more complications on the stove, and it's just not a well understood concept in medical circles. I don't think many doctors really know how energy is made in our body. It's absolutely fascinating. It's so central to our well-being, but I don't think they really know what the electron transport chain is all about, or what the Krebs cycle is all about, and how that enables us to get through the day. And I don't know. I think it should be the cornerstone of their education. It's just, to me, it's like they've got to be focused on making sure that people have energy to run their immune system.
Yeah.
That's really what it comes down to.
Now,
So,
last week you talked about the Great Oxygen Event. And
yeah.
so here I am, breathless, going up a simple set of stairs, and it had something to do with oxygen, tying into this whole Great Oxygen Event, the copper, iron, and everything that happened billions of years ago. So I'm sure that that biologically was impacting my physiology.
I think you were saying that you could do a treadmill, you could go out and jog, but it was the stairs that really brought you to your knees, right? I
Yeah.
think you had gravity working against you, um, but if you can't activate the oxygen, you can't release the energy. It's that straightforward, and you can throw all the iron you want at the mitochondria, but they can't activate the oxygen. They can oxidize it, they can rust it, but they're not going to activate it. And I think that's the part that is lost on a lot of people. That when you say activating oxygen, it means turning it into water, so it can release the energy molecules. And it's to me, it's the most important chemical transaction on the planet.
Now, you talk about certain enzymes that help activate many important systems in the
Right.
body. What would be some of the main enzymes that would be responsible for this?
Well, the who's who would be certainly we're talking about cytochrome C oxidase. That's complex 4. That's a biggie. Um, the ability to have the right form of iron for the recycling system that requires ferrooxidase. That's a very important enzyme expressed through ceruloplasmin. Another big one from ceruloplasmin is it's called amino oxidase. See, what a lot of people don't know is that there's excuse me, in chemical transactions there are what are called substrates, and these are the base chemical that you work with in order to turn it into something else. Well, the base substrate for ceruloplasmin, there's 15 different elements. It isn't just iron, and yet it's billed as being the iron enzyme, and I understand why, because it's a very central function. But it has to work with amino acids. It has to work with phenol groups, diphenyl groups. All the catecholamine groups can be oxidized by ceruloplasmin. And there's just this very narrow view of what this copper protein does inside our body. And if I was running Big Pharma, I'd want to kind of narrow cast it too. I wouldn't want people knowing that, well, ceruloplasmin can work with iron and copper and manganese and a whole bunch of other minerals. And it really works with oxygen. That's very, very important. And it's a very agile protein that can do a lot of things. So we've got the cytochrome C oxidase, we've got the ferrooxidase, we've got the amino oxidase, which is very important for neurotransmitter function. To keep track of when we were talking about the great oxygen event, what's created very easily inside the mitochondria are superoxide radicals. So I think superoxide is a misnomer. It should be called hyperoxide, not superoxide, because it's very reactive. But there's an enzyme called superoxide dismutase, SOD. It was originally discovered in the 30s by Killeen and Mann at Cambridge, but really brought forth by Joe McCord and his faculty advisor, Erwin Ferdovich, at Duke University in 1969. It was a major discovery that there was this natural mechanism to neutralize oxidative stress in the body. It completely redefined the capacity of the body to take care of itself. Another big enzyme would be lysyl oxidase. It's an enzyme that's when we're making connective tissue. We've got collagen, which is strong, and we've got elastin, which is flexible. Well, those two need to be zippered together, literally like a zipper. And the enzyme that brings those two proteins together, collagen and elastin, is lysyl oxidase, copper dependent, and the 45% of our body's tissue is connective tissue. 45%. It's not just cartilage and ligaments and tendons. It's blood vessels and fascia, and it's a very central part of our anatomy that no one's thinking about the fact that all these people are wearing boots now because they lack tissue integrity. They've got stress fractures are very common now. And because you can't make bone without lysyl oxidase. And then another big enzyme that's getting a lot of play right now, what's really hot in the literature is something called ferroptosis. So it's a regulated cell death that's triggered by iron. So you have apoptosis, necrosis, pyroptosis, which is using fever to kill the cell. Ferroptosis is using iron, and then cuproptosis. I mean, they're just coming up with all these different variants, but the prevalence of ferroptosis is lack of glutathione peroxidase. And glutathione peroxidase is another very important copper-dependent enzyme that neutralizes oxidative stress. And if the lipid peroxides that make up the membranes all over the cells inside the organelles, what have you, if they get exposed to iron, they will oxidize, and then you have a chain reaction of you got a mess on your hands, and then that's going to lead to further breakdown in the tissue integrity. So to me, the kind of this central role of copper is it brings integrity to the body. It's really what it's designed to do. That's its gift, is it knows what's needed, and there are only a select few scientists that regard it that way. But I think it's a much more honest way of describing what its function is in our body.
I heard you recently talk about something new that you discovered that is quite important to this whole story. And it's kind of a funny name, but it's
Yeah.
called the Rubisco enzyme, is it?
Oh, Rubisco. Yeah, I just stumbled upon it just in the last few weeks. It's the most prevalent protein on the planet. That's big, because it's in everything that's green. Anything that's green that's engaging in photosynthesis must have Rubisco. It's ribosyl diphosphate carboxylase, which is a very intimidating sounding mechanism. But carboxylase means that there's a carboxyl group. You're splitting carbon and oxygen. And what's happening is this is the enzyme that cleaves the carbon to release the oxygen so that we can breathe. That's big. And then the carbon goes it inserts the carbon into the glucose that the plant is making. So it's like, wow, this is really central to our well-being. And it's copper dependent. And it's taken me 16 years to find that. That's incredible. I was amazed that I had never heard of it, where that more people don't talk about it. Like if you're going to talk about photosynthesis, let's talk about Rubisco. It's huge. But people don't do that. It's just
Right.
it's fascinating how the truth of these mechanisms gets suppressed because they don't want people to realize there's this one little niggly mineral that's running all this stuff, and it's just it boggles the mind to think
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah, it is. It
Yeah.
is. It's mind-boggling how we can fall to pieces because of this imbalance that can take place for so many reasons, and we
Right.
discussed a lot of them last week. There's another enzyme you talk about, and of course, it's my namesake,
Yeah. Oh yeah.
and it's also another very interesting enzyme in the body as well that is, I believe, copper dependent as well, right?
Totally. The PAM enzyme, and it stands for peptidyl glycine alpha amidating monooxygenase. That's a mouthful. But we have hundreds, thousands of signaling peptides. There's all sorts of debate in the literature about how many of these chemicals need to be activated. But they're activated, it's called alpha amidation, that a glycine is cleaved off the end, and then an amine group, NH2, is put on, and that's when it comes to life. And the PAM enzyme is what enables that to happen. Well, I think it's very much involved in all of the hormone dysregulation we've got now. I think a lot of the neurotransmitter problems we've got now are a function of low PAM function. I would go so far as to say that just the overall breakdown of signaling inside our body is a function of low PAM expression. And there's a husband and wife team that studied this for 45 years, Betty Eiper and Richard Maines, 20 years at Hopkins, 25 years at UConn Medical Center. And think about having 45 years of continuous funding so you can study this one enzyme. Maybe it's important, right? And, hormones like oxytocin, vasopressin, just it's the real factor behind hypertension. We could just, if I just were to name the peptides that need to be activated, it would take up the hour of our conversation. And it's just what I find fascinating is this is not taught in medical school. I've not met a doctor yet who knows what it is.
Right.
And
Yeah.
I find that fascinating that they don't know this very sophisticated mechanism that enables the body to communicate with itself. I mean, it's literally these hormones are like cell phones, right? And they've got to be turned on. And they got to be able to talk to each other. And if they can't talk to each other, then you got a problem.
Mm-hmm.
And people don't know the reason why they're taking these synthetic hormones, which have already been activated, because they know you don't have the copper to do it on your own.
Right.
And I think that's wrong. I think that we should have this natural ability. And I think what's really weakening its expression is glyphosate. I think it's a very insidious farming chemical that's wiping out the copper at this very sophisticated level in our body.
Right, right. There's a lot of causes to the imbalance, but it's about the knowledge, really. Knowledge is power. And the other thing is people are just trusting the establishment way too much. They're all
Oh,
about profits, not about our health. And
yeah.
it's a revolving door. They're not going to spend time to analyze a lot of the work that you've done, Morley, that is so critical to learn, and they're not teaching it in medical schools. And the average patient doesn't know that the doctor doesn't know. And all they're doing is they have a 7 or 5 minute visit with them. They're going to write a prescription, in and out you go. They don't really have the knowledge base that they should have in order to deal with health. I mean, I just look at, if you walk around any hospital or medical clinic,
Oh,
just look at
sure.
the staff, look at the nurses, look at the doctors, look at how sick they look. And they're giving out
Hmm.
health advice.
Yeah, I
Sorry, there's
know.
a
It's
disconnect there.
a total disconnect. I mean, I was when I worked in those institutions, I was always shocked at the physical condition of the caregivers. So
I mean, here in
I
London, we
don't.
have the cancer clinic, Morley. We have the cancer clinic. And when
Okay.
you walk in the door, the first thing you see is a Tim Horton donut shop.
That's
Talk about
priceless.
job security, right?
Yeah, right. Guaranteed. So I don't know what it's going to take to wake people up. And maybe that's not the purpose of the experience here. Maybe we're supposed to be asleep, which is like, really? Seems like there's things we can do if we were awake. But and it's not complicated. It's just once you learn these mechanisms, once you learn that the body has this natural ability, that it just becomes a process of restoring nutrient status in the body.
Thankfully, we have an information highway where we can source good information. Unfortunately, there's a lot of bad information out there as well. So you have to be very discerning today. And
Right.
one element, one issue I would really like to speak to you about that is quite controversial, and there are a lot of figures that are polarizing this issue right now. And yet, I think you have a firm handle on the solution to this. Is the retinol and the vitamin A equation and how that ties into this whole iron and copper story. Do you mind if we just take a deep dive into that subject and try to clarify things for people?
Yeah. No, I think there's a lot of confusion out there around that, as you know. Um, the Everything changed in the 50s when President Eisenhower had his first heart attack, and they took cholesterol out of the diet. But people didn't realize when they took cholesterol out, they were taking retinol out because they hang around together. And so everyone lives, for the most part, in a low-fat diet, not realizing what they're sacrificing. We got we have a local dairyman who sells unprocessed milk here in North Carolina, and typically, in a gallon, maybe that much is going to be cream, which is amazing, and that cream is retinol. We had a gallon that we picked up last week. It was 80% cream. Oh, such luscious nutrition, and the average person would be horrified at that, and they don't realize the role that retinol plays to uh, wake up the copper pumps. There are enzymes that load copper into other enzymes, and they're activated by retinol. Very, very important, very central to their function. And the if the retinol is not in the diet, you're not going to be able to load up the copper, and you're not going to be able to manage the inflammation that is very central to. Again, there were some professors at Johns Hopkins back in the 80s and 90s that did a lot of studies on vitamin A deficiency and its impact on inflammation. It's well chronicled, and people just don't know about that literature. Now they're told that vitamin A is a toxin. You've got to be careful. Well, what people aren't being told is that the synthetic form is the problem. It's one thing to get it from a cow. It's another thing to get it from a test tube. And the other thing is that the body relies on these nutrients, and the downstream breakdown of retinol is really, really important. It isn't just that it's retinol. It needs to become retinoic acids, which are hormones, and there's 4 of them. And there are nuclear receptors. There are ARs, are ORs, are XRs, are ZRs. And they're very, very important for the communication at the gene level to, there's a section of the gene called the promoter region. Well, like the thyroid receptor and RXR need to come together. It's called a dimer, D-I-M-E-R. It's 2 parts. And when they come together, then the thyroid hormone can be made. But if you don't have the RXR, you can't make thyroid hormone. And so people are told that they are hypothyroid. What has nothing to do with a dysfunctional thyroid. It has to do with a lousy diet. They don't have enough retinol and fat in their diet.
None of it makes any sense to me that people would be so terrified of vitamin
Yeah,
A in animal foods. I'm Irish and Scottish,
right?
and your ancestors are probably from the same neck of the woods as me with a
So
name
look
like
at it.
Robbins. And they
Right.
thrived on a diet very, very high in animal fats, from animals that are, of course, pastured, not factory farm.
Absolutely.
And we survived quite nicely, Morley, or we wouldn't be here today. So,
That's exactly. No, people have lost all sight of the practical side of food, how our ancestors used to eat. And Dr. Liz and I have one of our cherished holdings is a Betty Farmer cookbook from the 1800s. And just, when you're thumbing through what they were eating back then, it's just amazing. The organ meats, the high fat, heavy cream, a lot of heavy cream, the butter. It goes on. And people, they just don't understand how important that is. I think the people within the West City Price community, they understand it.
mhm.
But the average person who's used to going to the supermarket doesn't understand what's in play. They don't realize the sacrifice they're making when they're trying to feed their family.
Now, the bile plays a large role in the absorption of vitamin A. Do you think that may be why some people are drawn to the anti-vitamin A angle? Could that be it? Because I know that I have to work really hard with people on their bile to get their bile thin and
Right?
working properly. I'm not sure if that's something you address with your clients, but maybe you can talk a little bit about the role that bile plays with vitamin A.
Yeah, on occasion. What's important to know about bile is there's again a signaling peptide called cholecystokinin, CCK. Very, very important for making bile, but it requires the PAM enzyme. So if the PAM enzyme isn't firing up the CCK, you can't really get the bile to work right. And so then we're left with supplements, ox bile. We go to different digestive enzymes, whatever, betaine hydrochloride, whatever. And it's just that people have a dormant digestive system, and it hasn't been awakened. And again, the CCK peptide, it's huge. It's critically important for our overall well-being, but especially for the movement of these nutrients. And the average person wouldn't know about that. They wouldn't know what CCK is.
No.
And that's unfortunate, because I think it's very central to a lot of the gut dysbiosis we have, is that people don't make the right, the signaling peptides just aren't working properly in their body.
I couldn't agree with you more. Once you get the bile going, it's amazing how much better people
Right?
feel. And that's a whole
Oh,
process, in and of itself to help heal the bile issue. But it's
yeah,
critical, as you say, to note the connection between copper, the PAM enzyme, and CCK. So that's an amazing piece to the puzzle right there.
yeah, yeah. And anytime I'm working with someone who has gut dysbiosis, I only have one question to ask. What is it you can't stomach in your life? There's always an emotional piece to the puzzle. And 100% of the time, they knew what it was. There was some emotional factor that was preventing them from having the full function of their digestive tract. So again, when you have chronic stress like that, it's going to trigger cortisol and adrenaline at some point. And the cortisol is going to lock up the copper, and then you're going to have a problem with a lot of different downstream chemicals that don't work without that copper. And so we're always going to have
That's
stress.
one of your removals, though. You do. We'll talk more about this next week, but you talk about removing things from your life as part of the healing
Right.
process, and in
Absolutely.
removing stress, right? This in turn helps to support the minerals simply because of the relaxation of the cortisol and the adrenaline. So I'm glad you touched on that point. Maybe we can talk a
Yeah.
little bit more about that right now.
Well, yeah, I don't think people, when I started this work, I was strictly Newtonian. You're missing a mineral, you've got to have something, and it's just not working right. Some mineral, some vitamin, some nutrient is required. And as I've evolved over the last 15 years, I'm 100% quantum now. I think it's all emotional. It's the emotions that are driving the physiological problems. And they get stuffed down, they get suppressed. People don't want to deal with their hurt emotions or their the heartaches that they've had throughout their life. And when you've got that situation where you have that kind of suppression, it becomes a sympathetic state. You're in an active sympathetic state.
Yeah,
You can't
constantly running
heal,
away from a lion, right?
right? You can't heal when you're in a sympathetic state. It's impossible. And so you've got to get people out of that sympathetic into a parasympathetic state so they can begin the healing process. And not everyone's ready to do that. It's
Well, they become
hit
addicted
or
to
miss.
that state, right?
Well, sure. Oh, it's what they know. That's their new norm, right? And but what they don't realize is that's what's keeping them locked in their broken physiology.
Right. And
And
In Buddhism, Morley, they say man walks around asleep until he hits the depths of suffering and then he wakes up. And so a lot of people
mm,
who are in that sympathetic dominant state that are addicted to that high, that constant high,
right.
it's very, very hard to get through to them. And I don't know if you noticed this, but a lot of them are quite angry, suffer with a lot of
Mm-hmm.
anxiety, a lot of sleep problems, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Another group of people that are constantly pushing themselves into that state would be people who are over-exercisers, continuously doing exercise to a high intensity. And I
Absolutely.
tell people they've just got to stop doing that and do gentle exercise.
Just walk. Just just a walk is all they need. And I've got a buddy of mine that I see every morning at Starbucks, and he's very fit. He's probably maybe 10 years younger than I am, but he goes to the gym 5 days a week, and he loves to pump iron. And I said, dude, you need to circulate the iron. Stop worrying about pumping the iron. And people don't understand that this recycling of the iron in our body is so essential to our well-being. And they think that, oh, if I can do a bench press, if I can do a squats, and like, no. I mean, that's valuable. It's important to have that resistance exercise. I understand that. But if you don't understand the mechanism for recycling iron, that's what's going to get you. It'll eventually take you down because the iron's going to pool somewhere. It's going to pool in some organ, and that's what's going to take that organ out, and that's going to be your downfall.
Yeah. And
People
there's
don't
the
realize
cause
that.
and the effect, right? Morley, when people are putting themselves through all that stress, it depletes things like magnesium. And I know you're known as Mr.
Mhm.
Magnesium, which I think is a bit
Right.
of a misnomer these days because that's old history for you, I think. But I'm
You
not
know,
saying magnesium isn't important. But if people can be more parasympathetic, they will actually conserve their magnesium.
absolutely. Oh no, it took me a number of years to realize why people kept losing magnesium because iron was unchecked, interacting with oxygen, creating oxidative stress. And then why was the iron unchecked? Because there's not enough copper. So it was just that was a real talk about a ton of bricks hitting me when I finally connected those dots. And so now it's been probably 10 years of just refining that understanding at a organ level, at a cellular level, at a mitochondrial level, and now I'm delving into the nucleus, and it's amazing what's going on inside the nucleus. I didn't realize how much of the nucleus was copper dependent. I didn't realize that.
Wow.
Histone metabolism, transcription, just the dynamics of keeping iron in the proper valence requires copper. I mean, it's absolutely fascinating when you get into it. And we're led to believe that gene defects exist. I don't think they are defects. I think it's mineral deficiencies that lead to the problems. That
Either that or toxicities, I think, as well. Toxicity
yeah,
plays a role in the DNA damage, if you will. I'm not a big fan of the gene theory at all. Yeah.
yeah. No, I was talking to a world-renowned iron expert a couple weeks ago. I said, "What happened?" He said, "We let the gene jockeys take over." He said they've completely distorted biology, and the genes do not run the body. We think they do, but they don't. They respond to the environment. So it's a
Wherever the money
fascinating.
goes, Morley, it's wherever the money goes, right? So in the 1800s, you had the germ theory. In the early
Mhm.
1900s, you had the vitamin theory, and that took off like crazy. And of course, then you have big pharma stepping in, and then you have talk therapy and all these sorts of things that are just not getting us to the root cause of the issue, right? And
That's right.
so we have these diversions for a reason.
No, very true. Absolutely true. Um, it's just it's. I don't know what it is about the next shiny object. People get distracted very easily, whether it's methylene blue or light therapy or whatever. It's just people are always looking for the next new technique to get them through the day, and it's like I think we have to go back to basic nutrition and make sure we've got the right nutrients, and the body knows what to do. It really does. I mean, it's absolutely amazing. But once the body can make energy, it knows exactly what to do.
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
Now, the other thing that I would really like to pick your brain on is EMFs.
Uh huh.
And this ties into minerals. And I
Yeah.
think one of the big reasons why people are reacting poorly to the EMFs, the man made ones, is because when you're exposed to these unnatural electromagnetic fields, it causes a surge of calcium through the voltage gate calcium channels.
Hmm.
And I'm wondering if you have any experience with this, first of all. And number two, do you think that by doing that, by surging the calcium through those voltage gate calcium channels, making maybe calcium unusable in that case, is that something that you're seeing? Is that something that I think we need to maybe address more with our clients? I do a lot of education around remediation, minimizing your exposure to the EMFs. They're hard to avoid, unfortunately. But I think fundamentally what I'm saying is that the EMFs really throw off our calcium, which is a very important mineral. And on top of that, we're storing that calcium potentially more in the cell, which could create a lot of symptoms as well. So I'm wondering if you have any familiarity with that, and maybe
Hmm.
you can just share some insights.
Yeah. Um, it's further complicated by the fact that the channel that you're talking about, the LTCC, L-type calcium channel, it's supposed to have an atom of magnesium there to protect it. And under stress, EMF stress, that magnesium gets knocked out. And it isn't calcium, it's not just calcium that's coming in the cell, it's iron. And there's a ton of iron that comes in through the LTCC. And not a lot of people know that. Turns out there's at least 7 doorways for iron to enter the cell, and there's only one doorway out. So people don't think about the different mechanisms of getting iron into the cell. And there was a time when iron wasn't as prevalent as it is today. So the body had to find iron to make sure that the individual would sustain their hemoglobin level and all the different enzyme functions that are run by the iron. But the people that I've worked with who are most sensitive to EMFs are iron toxic. They're not calcium toxic. And and if you're iron toxic, it means you're a copper desert. because you don't have the copper to regulate the iron, to recycle the iron. So I think that, I've had clients that were literally right next to towers that were just devastated by it.
Oh, yeah.
And
Did
then
they
having
develop
to move.
cancer? A lot of them might have
No,
developed
no.
cancer. No.
Well, I'm sure that does happen, but they ended up moving. They just weren't going to tolerate that. But
Right.
the real issue, she was iron toxic. She was very sensitive. And people don't think about iron coming in a channel that's called the calcium channel. They just don't think about that. But it's well documented. And obviously, exposure is huge. You've got to minimize your exposure. You've got to do whatever you can to regulate that. But you also have to mineralize your body so that you can optimize the magnesium in those channels so they're not letting the iron in. And we are being bombarded, as you know, with all these different 5G and every conceivable form of EMF. And it's challenging to get people to maintain a semblance of balance.
Yeah. Do you have any way to pull the calcium after it's been stuck in there? Is there something like pulsating electromagnetic fields or magnetic energy, anything to help try to pull all of that trapped calcium iron out of the cell?
Well, great question. I think magnesium is really good at regulating calcium, and copper is really good at regulating iron. And so I don't worry about how does the cell do it, how does the body do it. I just make sure that there's adequate amounts of the nutrient to let the body figure it out. Because I have this intuitive belief that the body can figure it out. And I'm not being naive or Pollyannish, but I just think usually what's missing in most people's body are the nutrients. They don't have adequate levels of the minerals, the vitamins, the other cofactors. And once you start to bring those back in, the body seems to perk up and knows exactly what to do. So I don't have a specific mechanism or a protocol just for that, because I'm really focused on just getting people back into some kind of mineral balance in general, not just around the EMF. But
Right.
obviously, it's a very sensitive area.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. You have to get everything in balance. Definitely. I couldn't agree with you more on that.
Yeah,
Another very, very interesting thing that I've heard you talk about are the different colors. We touched on it a little bit last week when you were talking about the spleen.
right,
But I find this very interesting from a quantum perspective. And
right.
you're talking about all the different organs and what colors they should be. And on top of that, you talk about the complex four being blue in color and that there's a reason for that. So I'm wondering if we can evolve into that story.
When you read about um, melanin and tyrosinase is what makes melanin. Melanin is the pigment that gives us color. Tyrosinase is at the center of the whole food vitamin C. Probably the richest source of tyrosinase would be mushrooms. Mushroom tyrosinase is probably the most prevalent form of tyrosinase on the planet. Um, but people don't think, they think about their hair color, their skin color, and their eye color. Well, that's just that's just the tip of the iceberg, because we've got to be able to our innards it's a coloring book. We've got to be able to color our organs the right color so they can vibrate at the right frequency. Really, really important. And the fact that the gallbladder is green, that's interesting. The fact that the spleen is purple, that's fascinating. Um, but it takes an ongoing mechanism of melanin production to keep that color alive, keep it vibrant, keep it vital. And people aren't thinking about that. And then you get to the fact that one of the most prevalent chemicals that's used in food processing are tyrosinase inhibitors, because they're trying to block spoilage. They're worried about shelf life, not human life. And so there are all sorts of chemicals out there that people aren't even aware of that are blocking their body's natural ability to keep itself properly colored. And that may seem like a luxury, but it's not. It's a very central part of our physiology, is having the right color. And I think it's fascinating that the research that was done in the 1960s in Japan, I've never been able to find the study, but it's mentioned repeatedly in the books by Pat Colby, who was a famous Australian animal farmer. But she talks about any animal with black hair. So black is all color, right? And so she points out the fact that any animal, whether it's a black cat or a dog, Labrador or Black Angus, whatever, any animal with black hair needs 6 times more copper in their diet than someone who doesn't have black hair. Think about that. 6 times more. So the Japanese were studying what does it take to support the black hair of Asia. They wanted to understand it. And it was an enormous bolus of copper. And she talks about shepherds would always have one black sheep in their flock. Always have a black sheep. Why? Because when the black sheep starts to go gray, they're running out of copper in the foliage that they're eating. And so they would move the herd to another spot. So this, again, it's fascinating to think about how important color is in our society, and yet we're completely detached from it because we just think it's hair color and eye color and skin color.
And I think you've said the melanin is copper dependent as well. I think that's how and why it's so important. Yeah.
Tyrosinase has 2 atoms of copper in it, and you can't make melanin without tyrosinase. And there's a famous MD PhD in Mexico. His name is Dr. Solis Herrera, SOLIS Herrera, Sunman, kind of a fun name. And his theory, and there's a lot of legitimacy to it, but his theory is that the mitochondria are dotted on the outside with melanin, and that it's the melanin on the outside that splits water into hydrogen and oxygen. And then what happens to the hydrogen and oxygen inside the mitochondria is it gets turned back into water. And so this is perfect engine around water and the melanin on the outside and the mitochondria on the inside. It's called Human Photosynthesis. It's an amazing book. I don't know whether he'll ever get the recognition for his innovative thinking, but it brings a level of common sense to understanding where does this oxygen come from that is so important for our mitochondrial function, and people just aren't even aware that possibility exists. So that this color thing is really, really important, and the mitochondria that we're so quick to talk about, their other name is purple bacteria. And
I heard you say that once. Yes, that's fascinating.
Right? And so the complex 4 that you were alluding to earlier it's sky blue. It's cerulean blue. You can look it up, Cerulean. It was a form of blue that was developed in the 1800s. It's fascinating. And artists like Monet were very quick to adapt it into their paintings because it's sky blue. It's a very unique color blue. And that's the color of our complex 4. And why is it that color blue? Because it attracts red light. So blue tissue attracts red light. And the red light is what blocks the nitric oxide to prevent the cycle in the mitochondria from completing itself. And so there's a very fascinating interdependence of light and color and minerals. And I just find it fascinating that people
I
should be
encourage
more
people to go out in
revolutionary.
the sun so they can absorb some of that red light, but not everybody's going to go out into the sun. And I heard you say that you're researching just red light therapy as an alternative because some people just don't spend the time outdoors as they should. So it's a
Yeah,
bit of a synthetic way to do it, but it's some way to do it anyway to try and boost the mitochondria.
absolutely. No, I think there's legitimacy to it, and it's very popular. But I would argue that red light therapy is an electronic crutch for copper deficient people because the red light, the frequency of the red light and the frequency of copper are identical, 600 nanometers. They're the same, and the frequency of blue light and the frequency of iron are the same. And so, light is really, really important in our body, and we need full spectrum light, as you're recommending. But the red light has special importance inside the mitochondria.
What are you noticing with people who might be doing the red light therapy?
Well, people find that they have more energy. They think that they get an edge. Is it a real edge or is it a psychosomatic edge? I don't know. I don't worry. I'm just thrilled that they feel better and that they feel like they're getting more mileage in their day. And so I'm like, that's fine. I
Do
think
they
that
detox, Morley? Do you ever notice any detox, any ill effects from doing red light therapy to get started?
great question. I don't know that I've ever noticed that. Um, it certainly would make sense, though, wouldn't it? That you would, if you're accelerating the exposure to that process and really accelerating the energy, you would think there would be a detox. So, but it's never really become a factor in the consults that I've done.
That's why these collaborations are so important. I think that we need to share notes on some of these things. My view is
Sure.
that I think people should start off slowly if they're doing red light therapy and gradually build up their time under the red lights because I
Yeah.
have seen people feel worse before they feel better. And how and why that is, maybe they're releasing some iron. I don't know. Maybe something like that is going on.
Well, there's definitely some kind of a Herxheimer reaction, but they're releasing something that they can't process. You're absolutely
Mhm.
right. Iron would be an obvious. Um, I don't know. That's intriguing. I have to play around with that. I'm
Well,
not sure
maybe
what.
we'll have
what
several episodes to share
yeah,
notes
that'd be
with.
great. That would be a lot of fun. See what the implications are.
Definitely, definitely.
Yeah.
Now, I think it's important to go back and talk more about the stress and cortisol
Mhm.
because you know the term adrenal fatigue or adrenal burnout, which
Right.
in a sense are way too simplistic when you're looking at the entire biochemistry of the body. And then it still ties into this whole allopathic take X to treat Y
Right.
ideology. So I think this story deserves some more attention because a lot of people who are going to be listening to this think they have adrenal fatigue, and they're not entirely wrong, but it's too
Mhm.
simplistic an approach. So I'm wondering if we can backstep a little bit, return to that subject, and maybe you can explain how and why we need to analyze that term, adrenal fatigue or adrenal burnout, and give it a different perspective.
Well, great point. I think that we're being conditioned to think that it's just the adrenals that are stressed out. I mean, they're taking it on the chin, but I think the overall body is stressed out. Um, there's a wonderful book, or not a book, it's an article by lead author's name is Zaman Pira. I think I might have mentioned it in our first conversation from 2019. But chronic stress it just zap you, and it triggers cortisol and adrenaline release, which is going to fatigue the adrenal glands. I'm not insensitive to that, but it isn't just the adrenal glands that are taking it on the chin, though. I mean, there's a there's a hypothalamus, there's the pituitary, there's the gonads. I mean, there's a lot of endocrine glands that are going to be affected by that kind of unrelenting stress, and we're conditioned to zero in on the adrenals. And what I find fascinating about the adrenals is they're different shapes. The left adrenal gland is completely different shape than the right adrenal gland, and it's fascinating to get into it. Um, and I'm blanking on what the real significance, but one has to do with fear, and the other has to do with chronic stress. And it's fascinating to think that the body has that unique design to be able to distinguish between the two adrenal glands. And what we find is instrumental in getting people out of this stuck state is just minerals. The adrenal cocktail is amazing for helping to restore the function of those that tissue, adrenal at the top of the kidney. It's so central to the function, and get people back in the game, get them making the chemistry that needs to be made. Where's the bulk of whole food vitamin C stored in the body? In the adrenal glands, which means there's tyrosinase there. And we're back to tyrosinase is very, very important for making a lot of chemicals, not just the melanin. And it's just getting people out of the predictable model of stress that is always the adrenals, and that you have to flog the adrenals. And no, you don't. You need to nourish them. You need to deal with your stress. You need to get more sleep. That's the one that people dislike the most is vitamin Z, because that means they've got to shut down their party. And I had definite adrenal fatigue before I did this work, and it took me over a year to get my adrenals back in the game. But I had to move from getting 4 to 5 hours sleep a night to getting 8 to 9 hours sleep. Once I did that, then my body's like, thank you, I know what to do now.
Yeah,
And
I've turned
people,
into a sleep coach because when I was sick in my 20s and my 30s, I was completely disabled in my
yeah,
20s and my 30s. And I was lucky to sleep a few hours a week. And this went on for years,
wow,
Morley, for years.
wow,
And so, in starting to do mineral balancing and talking to my clients, I would always ask them, are you sleeping okay? Are you sleeping okay? And one after another, people would say, yeah, I'm sleeping fine. I'm sleeping fine. And then you get the sleep tracker industry getting started. And I would say, I don't know if you're sleeping truly, genuinely well. Like you might think you're sleeping well, but are you getting good quality sleep? And so these
right,
trackers may have a place to determine the sleep
yeah,
quality because while people may think that they're sleeping, are they sleeping well is the question. And if
yeah,
you're
that's
waking
a
up
very good point.
tired, I don't think you're sleeping well. So it is critical for restorative health. I mean, we really do need to address high quality sleep. And as you know, the iron and the copper play a role in that as well.
Oh, totally, yeah. And again, people are just not aware of the centrality of these metals to our well-being. And iron is carrying oxygen, copper is activating oxygen. Big difference in getting people to realize that we need both. Can't live without iron, but it's got to be properly regulated. It's got to be properly recycled. And this idea that we need 18 to 20 milligrams of iron a day through our mouth is just lunacy. It's absolute. It's just such a distortion of the truth. It's very, very disorienting to try to get people off that mindset.
Now, all this extra iron, too, doesn't it support the parasites in the body as well? And too much
Yes.
parasite activity is hard on the sleep as well.
Well, it's going to support parasites and bacteria and virus and fungus. I mean, they all feed off of iron. And you'd be amazed at the number of people who don't know that. You'd be amazed at the number of practitioners who don't know that.
I know that.
That the iron is at the center of those pathogens.
Right.
They were never taught that. And it's not a criticism. It's just, I think they need to be more curious to
Well, I
say,
used to study the work of Hulda Clark decades ago. I've been in this industry for almost 40 years. I fell ill in my early 20s. And so I was very aware of the work of Hulda Clark, which was revolutionary at the time, where she was dealing a lot with obviously colon health, but a lot of her focus was on parasites. But she wouldn't have known about this iron equation.
probably not, parasites are prevalent. They're a part of, and so again, back to Pat Colby, who she writes wonderful books, natural goat care, natural sheep care, horse care, cattle care. She's written, I think, 6 or 7 books. But she says in all of those books about those animals, any animal that has copper deficiency will have parasites. Any animal that has parasites is copper deficient. They are mirror images of each other. And people don't realize that it's that central. They don't grasp the simplicity of that model.
Now, this is a question I have that's related to the parasites, and I've heard you speak about it before on other podcasts. And it ties into the alkalinity of the body. And I
Mm-hmm.
suspect that, first of all, people depend on that reading too much, I believe. And the other thing is
Mm-hmm.
if the person is overloaded with things like parasites that are putting out a lot of ammonia, I mean, this
Right.
can give a false reading, in my opinion. You can look alkaline simply because you're loaded with things like parasites.
That's right. That's very true. No, I think that there are really only two pathogens. I think there's bacteria and parasites. Now, can I prove that? No. I think Hulda Clark probably said there's just parasites, and they morph into each other. I think that was the work of Robert Taylor, who really pretty much thought it was pH dependent. I can believe that. It's just people don't realize that all of that changes when you restore energy and when you restore the mineral balance in the body.
I
There's
always
just
tell people, you see that dead deer on the side of the road, right?
right.
The
Yeah.
creatures move in to decompose it. There's no energy, right? There's no energy.
No,
And it
that's
sounds
exactly right.
crass, but I'd say you're like a dead deer on the side of the road, that these creatures are moving in to decompose you because you're slowly, gradually losing energy and leading yourself towards death.
They're
And
trying to
I'm
do their
sorry, it's
thing.
shocking, but that's how I felt in my 20s and my 30s. I could barely function in my 20s and my 30s. And you go out, it takes energy to pretend like you're okay. A lot of
Right.
people listening to this will probably understand that state. You're using up
Oh,
any energy that you have, tiny, tiny little bit of energy to go out and paint a smile on your face and pretend like you're okay when you're really not.
right. Oh, yeah. No, we've all been there. And I don't think people realize how important the ongoing process of making energy is. We take it for granted, but there's a very precise mechanism for making energy. And people don't realize the order of magnitude of mitochondria in their body, in their organs, and it varies from organ to organ, huge variation from organ to organ. And they've all got to have minerals to make energy. And it's just, that's lost on the world of the next silver bullet, the next
Right.
shiny object.
Next silver bullet. That's what people are looking
Yeah.
for, the silver bullet. This
Right.
takes
Yeah.
work. Getting healthy is like, I always tell people, it's like a full-time job.
It, it certainly is. It's a lifestyle issue. It's not a hobby. It's a lifestyle issue. I think
Definitely
really,
is.
really, really central to their well-being.
Now, I've heard you talk about the book 1984 in several podcasts. And I think I told you I wrote a book with Dr. Mercola called The Great Bird Flu Hoax. So I
Right.
think for
Right.
years they planned the pandemic, if you will. And look at how much it has devastated us and our health and our ability to get along as a society. And I think that truly right now we need to do a lot of healing based on what has happened in the last 5 years. And I think you know about the people who are behind the curtain, if you will, who are controlling a lot of what's going on in society right now. It sounds like you know a lot about the population control issues and so on. And I'm not trying to scare anybody, but I think that we need to be aware that illness is a profitable industry. And the younger we die, this is the word, Dr. David Martin talks a lot about this, that they don't want us collecting our pensions. I mean, the thing to do
Right.
to irritate these people the most, I think, is to be healthy.
Right.
That's
That's
not what they
that's a great
want.
strategy. No. No. I think I've read that people, the average person, dies 6 months after they retire. They only draw down their pension for 6 months. It's like, wow, I had no idea. Had no awareness of that. So I'm having fun. I mean, I'm just
You're irritating the people behind the curtain, Morley.
I know, right? But I'm having fun. No, people need to really question things more. They need to be more curious, and they need to realize that there is way more to the story than what's being bannered about on the internet. And it's just I worked in a consulting firm, and the founder of the firm, his name was Jerry McManus, brilliant guy, former Navy test pilot. And he had a saying that I think defines the internet. He said, a compendium of gossip is still gossip. And I think that's what the internet has become. It's just gossip. And people think that they're getting facts. They're doing what they call AI searches, most of which don't have footnotes. And then when they do have footnotes, it's fluff. They're not real footnotes. So I think we're losing the integrity of the truth in this modern era where we have access to all knowledge. We're getting a very distorted, watered down version of truth, which is frightening.
I say the internet is a blessing and a curse.
Mm-hmm.
I
Oh,
don't
yeah.
think I would have gotten well without the internet. This goes back many,
No.
many years when it first started, and I got more and more curious the more I could do searches. So I learned a lot initially about, for example, digestive health. And I came
Right.
across some actually decent information back then. But
Right.
now, today, you can do a search for digestive health and not come across anything that's really genuinely going to fix your digestion.
No, I think it's tragic. I think we are led to believe that we're getting access to all knowledge. We're not even close. And I'm very dependent on the internet. I don't want people to think I'm dismissive of it. I wouldn't have found all the articles that I read had I not done Google searches that got me to the actual scientific articles. But the scientific articles are where the truth is, not some website where someone's social media opinion. That's not truth as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, and then when I look at the medical establishment and I see their failure rate, and people don't question it at all.
Yeah.
Yeah, they keep relying on that for their answers, whether it's if they're diagnosed with cancer and they're going to cut, poison, or burn. There's 3 tools in the toolkit for that condition. Chronic fatigue is very, very complex. It takes a lot of knowledge, which you have. It's hard to know who to trust. It's hard to know what to believe today. But I think when you build communities, you can actually compare notes and actually see results. That's why I think this collaboration is so key, because I know that there's agendas behind a lot of other systems that are out there that are really not arriving to the central issues. I mean, even when I work with sleep and I teach people how to sleep better, there's tons of sleep systems out there, and people have to pay
Sure.
thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars to learn how to sleep well. And yet it's something that should be coming completely naturally for
Of
us.
course. Right. No, I think the loss of sleep, the loss of hair, the gain of weight, these are some of the most prevalent chronic conditions that people don't realize. Just our ancestors didn't have these problems. I mean, they did. I don't think they did, but it's become epic now. I mean, name someone that doesn't have a sleep issue.
I know. It's huge.
Right.
That's why I've decided to step in and try to help people. And I think
No.
it's the bedrock to true health. But again, when you look behind the scene, then you start arriving at the iron and the copper issue as
Right.
well. So it's all to me tied together. And then I work a lot with people going outside into the sun as well, because the sun helps support the melanin, which helps
Mm-hmm.
us with our detoxification as well. So I want people to spend more time outside. And Morley, when I work with people, if I look pre, say, 2020, and I would say to people, go outside, go grounding, go forest bathing, do things outside. I didn't have a way to structure that. I did not have a way to structure that because we didn't have the information until recently about how much time we should be spending outside and the importance of watching the sunrise and the sunset. Blue light blocking
Right.
glasses were an issue, but really not as well known as it is today. So I would suggest these things to my clients. In hindsight, when I think about clients who were stuck, I think those were the ones who didn't embrace the outdoors as much as they should have. And I
I think
think
that's
in
really
hindsight, if I
critical.
had done retests on them, I would have seen more results had they spent more time outside, as the
Mm-hmm.
sun is such a healing factor as well.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's a source of life. And again, copper has a magnetic attraction to sunlight. I mean, I learned that from an Australian chiropractor and naturopath, but he worked with alchemy for 30 years, studying copper and iron. And he said it's an undeniable attraction between sunlight and copper. I don't know what it is. but it's really important. But then let's come back to photosynthesis. Rubisco would not work without copper. So there's some mechanism in that sunlight that gets life on the planet to work, and we're just not embracing the simplicity of this model. We're looking
That's
for.
exactly
We're
it.
looking for
I've decided not to take clients unless they're going to go outside in the sun, go outside and enjoy the fresh air and the sunshine, because I don't want to see people stuck. I want to see people better yesterday.
mm-hmm.
And
Yeah,
now that we understand more about the dynamics with sunshine, that it's more than just building your vitamin D. There's a lot more
right.
going on, and they're still learning, right? But this fear of the
Absolutely.
sun, this attachment that we have with technology, I think I heard you say we live in technology prisons or something along that line.
Mm-hmm.
We
Yeah,
need breaks. We need to be outside. We need to embrace nature in order to allow our bodies to maintain its health or to heal the body.
right. Absolutely. And it's fundamentals, and people want it to be really complicated. It's not. It's fundamentals.
Do you ever monitor or take surveys of people in your groups about whether or not they're outside embracing the sun, or is that something you just let the individual decide what they're going to do?
I let the individual decide, and I know I've got folks who've taken my training who are very vigilant about that. I'm a little bit more laissez-faire, but there's some that are really very mindful of how important that is, which I think is great. I think that's really. I have one of our students. She was the most quote anemic person that I knew, and she said, "I know I'm not anemic, but there's something going on." And it wasn't until she spent more time in the light that she was able to overcome her low iron in the blood. It's a phenomenal.
By light, you mean
Um,
sunlight, right?
mhm. Yeah,
Yeah.
she lives in Los Angeles, and she changed her life. She changed her exposure to light, and it changed her physiology. It's a really fun process that she went through. So
Yeah.
it's living proof that this light is really really important. But especially
That's a powerful story, Morley.
yeah, no, she cured herself of anemia with light and the protocol, but the light was central to the mechanism.
Yeah, I
So
interviewed Dr. Martin Moore-Eid. He wrote the book The Light Doctor, and he says 2 hours a day. You need to be outside 2 hours a day. And,
okay,
that could be 10 minutes here and there if need be. I mean, if that's better than what you did yesterday, then so be it. If it's just 10 minutes
right,
3 times a day. But he recommends spending 2 hours a day outside.
yeah. Well, I'm guilty. I don't spend 2 hours. I mean, if I spend an hour, that's a lot. But my wife is always on me. She says, "Got to get out more. Got to get outside." And I get holed up in my office doing the research and stuff and talking on podcasts, things like that. That's probably my um, greatest Achilles heel is lack of exposure to light, and I think it stems from early childhood where because of my fair skin, I was afraid of sunlight. I would burn, but I don't burn now. There's no excuse now other than I'm just lazy. Just
Oh, it's just, I think it's really just about undoing habits
yeah,
and
yeah, no,
prioritizing it. I think that's all
absolutely,
it is.
yeah. No, it's just you get into a rut, you get used to it. Let's take 21 days. You know?
What I'd like to do is to study the transition that goes on in people's lives, whether it's through hair testing or through just testimonials of people. What happens when you do spend more time outside? What kind of health
Mhm.
improvements are you witnessing or feeling when you're spending more time outside? And is that time outside structured? So are you watching the sunrise, sunset? Are you sky gazing throughout the day? Are you wearing blue light blockers? I did a great interview with Dr. Jim Phelps, and he does dark therapy with
Mm.
clients who have all sorts of mood issues. And so his thing is, of course, the darkness at night is really critical. So you're staying off screens, you're wearing blue light blocking glasses, your room is
Mm.
as dark as possible. and that helps
Right.
optimize your melatonin. And
Right.
that, of course, is a very powerful antioxidant and has many, many healing properties. And so his thing is darkness. He knows about sunlight, but he
Mhm.
really focuses on darkness. And it's that darkness at night that is actually very, very healing for our physiology as well. So the darker the room, the
Mhm.
better. Staying off your screens, all of these things are also very medicinal to the body.
Melatonin is the chemical of darkness. It's very,
There you go.
very, very important.
I think
Very,
you
very
say it's a
important.
combination of melanin and serotonin.
Yeah. Can't get there without copper.
Yeah,
So
and then you set the
very
right environment and you sleep better, your body has more ability to heal, you
right.
balance your minerals. I mean, there's so many factors to consider here, but the more we can compare notes and hear back from people, certainly with your group. I mean, I know you guys collaborate quite a bit, but I think it's something that people should be embracing as much as is comfortable for them. People who work night shifts and so on, there's going to be exceptions to the rule. That's a tough thing to address is the night shifts. Yeah.
No, it's very, very hard. And that was always my sister's downfall. She started out as a night nurse and just she never really recovered from that. It was really kind of threw her into a tailspin for many, many years.
Yeah, the World Health Organization calls working shift work a probable carcinogen. So
Mm.
it's very hard on the body.
I
I did
believe.
it in high school and university. I worked at a credit card company, and it was open 24 hours a day. And I worked there throughout high school and university. And I just kick myself now, knowing how much it really threw off my circadian rhythm and my health in general. Like it didn't help at all.
But now you have a success story.
Well, I just
That's
would
right.
tell people if you have kids who are going to work night shifts, tell them no, your health is more
Yeah,
important
exactly.
because
Right.
as you know, your health, without your health, you have nothing. And I had to learn that
That's right.
myself. So
It's the central issue for most people.
I think we should end on that note because I know that you've got something to do in about 10 minutes. And we can just wind down maybe by adding a teaser for the third episode where I think we need to get into more of the nuts and bolts of the root cause protocol, how and why you
Yep.
choose the methodologies that you choose, and maybe provide some feedback from some cases that you've worked on. I think
Hmm.
that will definitely take up a big chunk of time. So I think we'll do that in the third part of our interview here.
No, I look forward to it, and I just would get people ready to talk a lot about the copper protein ceruloplasmin. It's very, very important, and it's not a household name. It should be, but it's not. But we'll have a chance to really talk about why the protocol is designed the way it is to support its increased synthesis in the body. Very, very important.
Critical, critical. Well, each
Yeah.
episode is going to build on the next. So I look forward to part three with you next week, Morley.
Okay.
And I really want to honor you for the work that you're doing and really want to thank you for the time that you've spent with me over the last 2 weeks.
Happy to
Anyway,
do it.
keep up the great work, and I'll look forward to speaking with you again next Monday.
Great. I look forward to it. Thanks so much, Pam.
Thank you for taking your precious time to listen to today's podcast. For more information about my health coaching services, feel free to visit my website, www.pamkilleen.com. That's KILLEEN. And there you'll find many articles, podcasts, and more information about my health coaching services. I'm also on Substack. And finally, to finish, here is the disclaimer. The information on this podcast is for educational purposes only and is not intended as medical advice. We are not licensed healthcare providers, and our content is not a substitute for professional medical diagnosis, advice, or treatment. For personalized health guidance, or if you have specific medical concerns, please consult a qualified medical professional. They can assess your individual health needs and offer recommendations tailored to you. By listening to our podcast, you agree to this disclaimer. We assume no responsibility or liability for actions taken based on the information provided herein.